What is up, you guys? In today's video, I'm going to tell you why small tweaks to your business can dramatically change the amount of money that you get to bring home and keep this year. Let's dive in. All right, well, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the podcast. By the way, the next several episodes that we're gonna be dropping, I'm gonna have a whiteboard with me. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I highly encourage you to come check this out on the YouTube channel. Search for Vaught, you can find me. It's gonna be super helpful to be able to see exactly what I'm talking about as we draw some things out on the whiteboard. We're mixing it up a little bit today. I hope it's gonna be helpful to you. So as we dive into today's video, I wanna talk really about margins and understanding margins. And so just to begin, I wanna talk about this concept of small wins steer big ships, okay? Your business, which is a big ship, right? There's a lot going on. There's lots of components inside of that. It is directed by small changes, okay? A lot of people think that you have to hit these home runs, you have to make these big decisions all the time to take your business to the next level. Sometimes that's true. Most of the time, it's small changes consistently implemented over time that really makes the biggest difference on your business. And so as we dive in here for a second, imagine that this bar is your business, okay? Imagine that this is the total revenue that you collect, let's say in a month, okay? Let's just use $10,000 as an easy example and easy math. So let's say that the total revenue that you collect every month is $10,000, okay? You'll have to excuse my shaky whiteboard and my shaky handwriting. Let's say $10,000 your total revenue. As you know, you have multiple expenses, right? There's multiple things that you have to pay in order to fulfill on your services, fulfill on your promises. So if you are a woodworker, which I'm assuming you are if you're watching this video, this one might be materials. Okay, so all this is material costs that comes right off the top, okay? If you have any employees, let's say that this is your labor cost. Then let's say you have overhead. Let's say you have rent, you have insurance, you have utilities, your fixed everyday expenses, okay? So this is overhead. Well, and then this is my least favorite category, which is miscellaneous expenses, which we all have. We mess stuff up, we have to redo it, we have to fix stuff, get stuff replaced. We're just gonna say this is miscellaneous expenses, okay? Well, ultimately, all that you're left with after a $10,000 month is your net profits, okay? Net profits is what is left of the pie after you have paid everybody everything that you need to pay in order to fulfill on your services, okay? Now, I want to just say something real quick. When I first started in business, I was very enamored by a big business, very enamored by really growing this bar, growing total revenue, increasing my total revenue dramatically. And now, you do need to increase your total revenue, but one thing that I've learned the longer that I've been in business is that the only thing that matters at the end of the day is this right here. It's the only thing that matters. How much money do you get to keep? That's the only thing that matters. I would rather have a smaller business where I keep a lot of the money as opposed to a really big business with lots of operations, lots of overhead, lots of challenges, and keep a very, very small percentage of the money. Now, the only examples here that don't really apply to this are like really big businesses where you have like Tesla, Amazon, or you have Google or Apple, right? That's a very large pie when they're doing billions and billions and billions of dollars every year in revenue, and that's totally fine. We're not those people, okay? We are growing something out of our garage, growing something out of our basement. When I say growing something out of our basement, let me be clear. We're growing a woodworking business out of our basement. Keep it legal, my friends. So what you need to think about as we're talking through this thing is how do I grow my total revenue, but ultimately how do I increase my net profits, okay? And my net profit margins, okay? So let's say that right now, on average, you are a one-man team, you are doing $10,000 a month, and you're keeping 40% of your net profits, okay? So you have 40% profit margins. Let's say that this is you right now. 40% profit margins. You don't have rent, you don't have a lot of fixed expenses, you don't have any employees, you may not even be spending any money on marketing. Well, the beauty of business and the beauty of scale is if you do it right, the bigger your bar gets, your total revenue, the bigger it gets, you should also see an increase in profit margins. Why? Because you have fixed overhead expenses. Okay, if you have fixed overhead expenses, they're the same whether you generate 100 times the sales this month or you don't generate any sales this month. Fixed expenses mean that they don't scale with your business. If you're paying $2,000 a month in rent, whether you do a whole lot of business out of that place or not any business at all, you got to pay $2,000 a month in rent, right? But if you're doing 40% profit margins, I want to talk to you today about how you can increase this amount of money that you get to keep, okay? So let's say that you're doing $10,000 a month. So 10K times 0.4, which is your 40% profit margins, means that you're keeping $4,000 every month or $48,000 a year. That is what you're doing with 40% profit margins. Now, let me show you the power of margins, okay? So let's say right now you're spending 30% on material costs and you're spending 20% on labor costs. Well, let me do this. You're paying yourself the labor, so you're a one-man crew, so don't worry about the labor costs right now, but let's just say that you're paying 30% in material costs. And you figure out how to get the same quality product with materials from a different vendor that's 30% less or 40% less. Or one of the things that we teach inside of the Woodworking Accelerator program is how to wrap our tabletops. So instead of using 8/4 material for our tabletops, we're using 4/4 material. It's less per board foot using 4/4 inch thick material for our tabletops, and it's half as much. Right? So I've taught how to wrap these tables so that it gives the appearance of a thick, heavy table, but you're cutting out a ton of cost, okay? So let's say that you figure out how to take this 30% material cost down to, let's just say 25% for easy math. I was gonna say 22, but I'm not smart enough to do this on the fly if I say 22, okay? So let's say that you take it from 30 down to 25. Well, there's a 5% difference here in what you're spending. So you were spending 30%, you were spending $3,000 a month on materials. Well, now you're only spending $2,500 a month on materials, okay? So your profit margins just went from 40% to 45%. Now, here's another really cool option. Let's say that you have some fixed overhead expenses and you figure out a way to eliminate some of these expenses. What's a way to do this? Okay, let's say that, I'm just gonna use some random examples here. This is where you have to learn how to think for yourself on how to do this, but I'm gonna give you some really great theory, give you some stuff that will really kind of challenge the way that you think. And so let's say right now that you have a shop, you're spending $1,000 a month on it, but you have a lot of unused space. You could sublease your shop to someone else to come in, let's say for $500 a month, or two guys to come in, two different guys to come in on a section of your shop that you don't really utilize. They're coming in and they're completely covering your shop. So your overhead, let's say your overhead was, let's just say it was 10%, and now it's gone. So we took it from 10% to nothing because that $1,000 a month in rent that you were paying, you're now subleasing your shop, they're paying your rent for you. Well, where does this 10% that you were spending go? It goes back to the bottom line. So we went from 45 to 55% margins. Now, keep in mind here that right here at 40%, if you didn't grow your business at all, if you just continue to do $10,000 per month for the rest of eternity, and you went from running 40% margins to 55% margins, well, instead of making $4,000 a month or $48,000 a year, you're doing the exact same thing, and now you're making, so we're gonna do 10,000 times 0.55, which is $5,500 a month. You increased your bring home pay from $4,000 to $5,500 per month, and $5,500 per month times 12. 5,000 times 12 is $60,000. So this is $66,000. So you just you gave yourself a raise of, let me double check here. Okay, so excuse me for having to pull out the calculator and do the math. But by making these simple changes, okay, by taking material costs from 30% to 25%, and by eliminating your 10% fixed overhead expenses, and you guys, you can do this 100 different ways, okay? So you can figure out ways to cut back on material costs, figure out ways to cut back on labor, figure out ways to cut back on miscellaneous overhead. There's so many different ways to start refining your margins, and you do this through new vendors, new processes. A lot of you guys are just taking way too long to build the stuff that you build, and you can refine your processes and get twice as much done in the same amount of time. Or let's just even say that you got 30% more done in the same amount of time. That's going to dramatically change the amount of revenue that you're making per hour. It's going to dramatically change your net margin. So let's say when you started, you had 40% net margins, you were making $48,000 per year. And now, after a few small tweaks, taking material costs from 30 to 25% and eliminating overhead expenses from 10% to none, you have gone from 40% profit margins to 55% profit margins. You've gone from $48,000 a year to $66,000 a year bring home. You gave yourself an $18,000 per year raise. Or another great way to look at that is that you increased your bring home income by 37.5%. Now, if you walked into your boss's office today and asked for a 37.5% raise, they would tell you that you're crazy and that you should probably go find another job. But the beauty of owning your own business is that by being strategic, making a few changes, you can dramatically change your bring home pay because small wins steer really big ships. So if this video was helpful to you, be sure to let me know in the comments below. If you have not subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe. This is the greatest channel on YouTube, in my humble opinion, to help you grow the business side of your woodworking business. So with that being said, love and appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next one.